Alastair, thank you very much indeed.
Well, it really is a kind of pleasure to be here. This is my first TEDx event, and one of the things that's really interesting, we're 3 talks in, is the kind of parallels that there are between very, very different fields and very, very different topics. When I was sitting listening to those first 3, there were quite a lot of resonance with some of the issues I'd like us to bring in. Now, the topic, or the title, why leadership is finally being taught in schools now, it's emerged from a conversation I had with Anthony, a brief conversation not that long ago. However, having reflected on it, I'm afraid I want to change it a little bit, Anthony, if that's okay, if you don't mind. And I have a particular issue with one of the words in that title, and it's actually the word taught, which is a little bit ironic given I'm a teacher. And the reason I've got an issue with it is that it's very difficult to actually teach anyone anything. What actually happens is that people learn. And that's something that I know there are teachers here in the audience today. I think that's something that every teacher themselves would actually recognise or would come to realise. You know, there are days when we invest the best of ourselves and we use the most appropriate methodology and we've got all the great resources. And at the end of it, we're still there and they just don't get it. And it's something outside. And that's something that I want us to reflect on for a couple of minutes. There's a very interesting book that was written in the 50s, which makes it a little bit dated perhaps, but it's got a very intriguing title, and it's called How Children Fail. And it was written by an elementary teacher in the US. And he spent a number of years examining why children, despite the fact that teachers were trained, despite the fact that their teachers were well-intentioned, mature, intelligent, all of these positive aspects, right? Despite all of that, there were still many, many children leaving school and they hadn't gone through the development that they would expect. And one of the lessons, one of the things that emerged from all of the case studies, or from many of the case studies, was that the problem that the children were facing was that they were actually trying to learn someone else's answers. They were trying to do the work for the teacher. And that's something that I think we would all recognise. If you're trying to do something that is someone else's, it's not really going to help you kind of move on as a person. More recently, there's been a very, very powerful analysis done of many of the studies, lots and lots of studies. Lots of people spend a lot of time looking at learning. It's a big part of what we do as a society. And there's a book that's been written about 5 years ago by a professor, John Hattie. I don't know if any of you have read it, but it's making a big impact on what we do. And what he did, he went and he basically looked at tens and tens of thousands of studies of the factors and that contribute to good learning. And he drew up this list of 130 different things that make a positive difference. I'd actually be quite interested in what you think is at the top of that list. Now, if you've read the book, don't give the secret away. But anyone, you're all intelligent, you've all been at school. What do you think is up there at the top of the list? Because there are some surprising positions for things that we would maybe think. And if you... Happiness. Happiness. Yeah, happiness is undoubtedly key, but it's certainly nowhere near the top. Any other suggestions?
Instinction.
Sorry?
Instinct.
Instinct, yeah. There are loads of things that come across, things like happiness, things like personality. Where would personality sit? Where would motivation? Motivation surely got to be key. Motivation somewhere down like 80th in the list. Personality, resilience, all those kind of things, they're much, much lower than we'd expect. The thing that he identified was that it's actually, if you give students a program where they report their own grades, they write their own grades, that is the thing, the single thing that has the biggest difference. Now, that sounds like madness because we invest a lot in training, we invest a lot in teachers, so why on earth would we get students reporting their own grades? Nearly 80,000 students, 200 plus studies, that's a finding that he got from that. Now, that's kind of, maybe shouldn't be a surprise to us if we reflect a little bit on what the earlier studies were showing. They were showing that if the students didn't have an ownership and they didn't have an understanding, then they weren't going to develop. And that's really what this study is revealing. So I would really like to shift
from schools teaching leadership to leadership being something that we learn, something that the students learn. That's a small kind of shift. The second aspect that I would like us just to consider is that of leadership. Leadership is something that lots and lots and lots of people think about. There's many, many books written about it, lots of studies and PhDs done it. One of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to see, well, what impact does that have on students, or what do students do? And it's quite interesting what we actually get from the students. If you ask a student, what do you think about leadership, or what is leadership? What does leadership mean to you? The answers that they give are not necessarily that surprising. They've got quite a crude understanding of leadership being about decisions and about rules and about giving people orders and marching from the front. That's not really that surprising. And if you ask them to give examples who they would view as leaders, they bring up people, iconic figures, Steve Jobs or Barack Obama or someone from the news or even Chairman Mao. And again, not surprising. These are things that people would. These are individuals people would hold up. But we should really reflect on that and examine what that is actually telling us. And what is that is actually indicating is indicating that these students are looking at leadership as something somewhere else. It's not something that is in where they are. It's something else. It's someone else's thing. Leadership is something that Steve Jobs does, or leadership is something that Barack Obama does, or leadership is somewhere else. And like we were kind of seeing with the students in the 50s, if learning is something that is happening because of someone else, then the aspect of leadership is happening somewhere else. Then it's not going to be something that actually takes root. Now, with what we've been doing in the school, we've got many kind of interesting examples are emerging. And if we are having this idea, one of the things that we're wanting people to get is we're wanting them to get their own ownership of it. Now, how do we do that? Well, there are lots of things we can do, and lots of well-established practices. You can have expeditions, you can have outward bound courses, or you can have special events where students take responsibility. Those are very, very important. They are life-changing for some people, these experiences, and we would want to continue them. But it's not enough. If it only ever exists as something that is on a special occasion, or if it's only ever something that exists when you are in a special place, then it's going to be limited in what you can do. And so one of the things that we're trying to look at is we're looking at, well, where do students spend all of their time? Where do students spend all of what they do? And they spend all of their time with their peers, or they spend their time in the classroom. And they spend their time in the classroom. I'm a high school teacher, a secondary school teacher, so I teach chemistry. So they spend their time learning chemistry with me, or they spend their time learning history, or they spend their whatever time. Or if they're in a primary school, they spend their time learning. And if we are saying that leadership is a key priority, and I think we would agree that it is a key priority. We don't have the time here to look at societal issues. I mean, our society is changing and it's becoming something else. But I think schools across the world, educational institutes around the world, it's not by accident that we are all looking at the same kind of thing: character development, capacities, developing people's positive characteristics. We're saying it's a key kind of thing, and yet at the same time we keep it for special occasions, or we keep it for discrete occasions. Now, I'd like just to take a sidestep to try and explain one of the principles that we're looking at employing. Schools are all about learning, and about 10 years or so ago, the education committee, education community had a big push towards learning about learning, and that makes perfect sense. You know, it's a key activity. It's something you can get better at, and so we should teach students how to learn. We should study how to learn. We should develop the skills how to learn. All makes perfect sense. One of the things that we were finding, however, is that despite our best intentions, despite all of the intelligence and all of the reflection that was going on about all of these kind of things, yes, it was making an impact, but it just wasn't quite making the impact that we were expecting, or it wasn't quite delivering the returns and the benefits in students just becoming that much more able with their learning. Why is that? Well, It's because what was happening is schools and teachers were giving a lesson about learning, a special lesson about learning. And then the 40 minutes, the hour would be over, and they'd go back to the regular work. And then a week later, they'd have another lesson about learning. And then they would go back to the regular work. And it's that dislocation, that separation out. Learning is about something. Learning is used for something. And learning is a development of a capacity that you can do something you couldn't do before. And what we're seeing is that if we take the principles, yes, we need to understand the principles. Yes, we need to understand the basic biology behind learning. Don't keep it separate. Put it in. And it's the same with leadership or character. You can't divorce it from what people are doing in their everyday surroundings. I was going to have a quote from Michel Montaigne, and I can't remember it verbatim. Some of you may actually have come across it. I'm sure, because I got it in an email bulletin from something called the Gurteen Knowledge Quote. Some of you may be on it. And it came through the other day, and quite serendipitously. And it was, the premise was, yeah, you can run an embassy in a foreign country, you can wage a war, you can be a ruler, and these are great things. But the tougher thing, or the kind of more remarkable thing, is to live your everyday life, and to live that with a consistency, and to live that, and to face those challenges as truly and as well as you can. And that's what one of the things that we've begun looking at. And so this is a huge learning curve for us, and it's a great learning curve. And moving away from the student's benefit, just the fact that we are spending time examining what we do, and spending time thinking about what we do, and like facing up to the mistakes that we're making, or kind of finding out how we can do things better. Well, there are 6 things that we're trying to do, and if you're a teacher, or if you're an educator, or if you're a business person, thinking about these 6 things and how they would tie if we could get people developing them. So, one of the things about learning is you encounter something new. And what can a leader do with something new? Well, a leader can take something new and they can make a connection to something else. Or they can see how it fits, how it relates. They can recognize it. Another thing that we all face is when we're faced with something, what does it do to us? How does it make us feel? Sometimes it will scare us. Sometimes it will make us happy. Sometimes we'll have a response. What do we do with that response? Well, sometimes we can have a response that will close us off. Other times we have a response that can open us up. If we are to be a contributor to what we're doing, what would we do? We would open up. We would have a generosity of spirit to kind of participate, or we'd have the confidence to take risks. And that's one of the things what we want to be thinking about. We want to be thinking about how we respond. And from that, then, we're thinking about, well, reason, working out answers. That's a big part about what school is. People get answers. How do you get answers? What do you get answers? Now, one way of getting answers is, I'm right. I've worked out. That's close enough. What we really need is we need people to work together. We need that sense of collaboration, because the benefits that come from working together are much, much stronger. Creating, making something new. Do they have the confidence to do that? Now, the challenge for us is that these things are not separate. The challenge for us is that these things and these attributes, they come into every single thing that we're doing. So when I'm delivering a chemistry lesson, how can I get the students to open up? How can I get the students, how can I use ionic bonding to make people more receptive to new ideas? How can I get solubility to make them more creative? That's a challenge, and that's something that I think we're discovering some great things about, or we're discovering interesting things about so far. And so what we are trying to do, or what I think the education community is trying to do, is we're trying to move from that generation where children were failing into a place where you can put people and they'll end up thriving. And that's something that we would like to share with you, and we would really like your participation. Thank you.